And it looks like Leo is giving us a talk titled Doing a Lot with a Little, Working in Austere Windows Environments and Turning Simple Ingredients into Delicious Curries. An introduction to making the most of things with limited resources. As hackers, we are often asked to work in restrictive environments, be it Citrix-only access to a server, a Windows appliance in kiosk mode, or a network with no internet access. This portion of the talk will introduce the audience to some of the more interesting features built into Windows and how they can be used to help us hack when our usual hacking tools aren't available. From basics defining binary data with certutil so it can be copied and pasted as a text, port scanning with PowerShell, to using printers and error messages to escape restricted GUIs. This portion of the talk will encourage everyone to think creatively about what you can do with the tools built into Windows. This segment assumes a working familiarity with the Windows operating system. It does not assume or require any knowledge of Windows internals, lol bins, PowerShell, etc. Followed by an introduction to making curries out of almost anything. This portion of the talk will show the audience just how easy it can be to make curries at home. Focusing on making healthy, delicious meals with only a few ingredients, this presentation will start with how to make the base for any curry. It's just onions and some kind of curry powder, and then adding whatever meat, fish, and or vegetables you happen to have around. After a couple of walkthroughs, slides, not live, will be shown a simple fish curry with only 6 ingredients and a delicious vegetable curry that can be made with almost anything. This portion of the talk will give viewers the confidence to spice up their homemade meals and experiment with different ingredients and recipes. This segment assumes a basic knowledge of cooking, such as making plain rice, chopping ingredients, and operating a gas or electric stove. It also assumes access to a kitchen with basic equipment and to onions, salt, oil, and some variety of curry powder. So Leo, are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that introduction, Moonin.
Fantastic. Over to Leo without any further delay for our final talk of the day on PancakesCon Track 2.
Cool. So hi, everyone. Yeah, this is Doing a Lot with a Little, and hopefully you can learn some tips and tricks for using Windows and making food. So who am I? My name is Leo Adrien. I'm on Twitter at Australio, and I'm a security consultant who does pen testing and red teaming for a company based out of Sydney. And at home, I do sort of security research and a lot of cooking. So what to expect? As Moonin said with the introduction, some tips and tricks for working in restrictive Windows environments. So maybe how to escape some lockdown GUIs, or how to navigate isolated networks when you don't have the normal tools that you want to be using. And then also how to make some delicious curries now that we're all stuck at home for a while, and what you might want to try and get in the pantry so you can make them. Okay, so why can't we just use our elite hack tools? When I started working as a pen tester, I just finished my OSCP. I had this sweet customized Kali box, and I thought I was some kind of Metasploit ninja. But I pretty quickly realized that on a significant portion of the testing I was doing, none of that really mattered. Big corporate environments are not designed for plugging random computers into and pressing hack. Firewalls, network segmentation, vendor appliances, business policy perhaps. There's a lot of reasons why maybe we can't just go in there with all of our cool tools that we've written or gotten off the internet and start playing around. And so that's where it comes in handy to have some tips and tricks up your sleeve when you do need to either get the job done or try and get some connection back to your host or the internet so you can get those tools. Yeah, working with what's there. So GUI restrictions, not as common as network stuff, but I've seen a few around, and especially now if you're working through some kind of virtual desktop, like maybe Citrix, you're often going to be given an environment where you have one app, so to speak, in Windows. So maybe it's Internet Explorer or some kind of mail client or a document, but you're not given access to the whole operating system. And the other time you'll see this is in some kind of kiosk mode. If you get the opportunity to test those, they're a lot of fun. So our goal here as a hacker or a tester, or maybe just someone who needs access, is to try and escape whatever application we've been put in so that we can actually start using the tools on the operating system or get a connection back to our machine. So Explorer is pretty much God on Windows. If you can get an Explorer shell, you can generally do whatever you want. The only exception to this is in really new versions of Windows. If the sandbox or the application is a Windows Universal platform, so a Windows Store app, There's actually some really good sandboxing on that. Microsoft does consider it a security boundary, but I don't see that very often. Generally, vendors want to try and reinvent the wheel. They make their own kind of kiosk application, and usually it's pretty easy to escape if you can get some kind of Explorer shell. So in this case, just a really simple Chrome in kiosk mode, and there's no start menu, there's no tab at the bottom. But if you right-click and go to print something, then you can click Find Printer, and suddenly you've got a GUI, and you can do what you want. There's some other common ways if perhaps you can't print or you don't have right-click for save as and things. Those are usually my first go-tos. If you can get some kind of error message up, that's always a good way. So I was on a test for a kiosk once. It was reasonably well locked down. So it was just like a really simple web page with some information. Didn't have right-click available. Couldn't manage to print anything or save or download anything. But the kiosk wasn't very well physically secured, and it turned out that if you just unplugged the Ethernet cable, when it tried to load the page, it would fail and give you this error message. And you just click through the diagnostics dialog, you get a link to a cab file, and when you click that, it opens Explorer. So just another way to try and jump out, get into that Explorer window, and from there try and get to cmd.exe or whatever you want. You can run Explorer to open up a full GUI if you want it. Sticky keys is another really good one that's common, especially in things like Citrix environments. You can usually get a sticky keys prompt in the Citrix window by pressing Shift a few times, 5 times to be specific. That'll give you a link to the Ease of Access Center. And again, that's going to give you an Explorer window. Sometimes it's not that simple though. So for example, maybe you do get an Explorer window, but you can't switch directories, you can't access the other applications on the operating system. And that's where we might need to try something a little bit more advanced, a little bit more tricky that hopefully the vendor hasn't thought of. So there's a couple of things I would try first. So you can actually give Explorer a CLS ID. So that's a sort of link to a COM object that's been registered in the Windows registry, and you just put shell /:, and then a GUID into the Explorer bar, and this particular one launches the little run prompt. But there's a number of them. You can use them to get to other directories or to launch programs. But that's a feature that isn't commonly known about and can sometimes get you around some restrictions. If you do have some kind of network access to the host, you can try and visit a WebDAV server or an FTP server with just an Explorer window, and from there, hopefully, you can run your tools or copy tools as needed. And then finally, really nice trick is just trying to access something using a UNC path. So a UNC path starts with a / and then a host name or an IP address, as opposed to a DOS path, which starts with a drive and then a drive letter and then a :/. So that one actually I used to escape this Citrix environment. I couldn't use a regular DOS path, but if I try to visit the Windows or System32 through a localhost path, then I can access it no problem, and I can actually get command prompt to run there. Okay, what if command prompt itself is blocked? That is the case sometimes, again, especially with kiosks or some of the more locked down Citrix environments. You can try copying, renaming it. That's a pretty common one. Usually they'll do some kind of blacklist, so things like PowerShell and cmd.exe won't be able to start. But if you can get a copy of that and rename it, that'll work pretty well. If you can't move directories at all, so maybe even with localhost, if you can get some kind of notepad document open, so either you get in a directory that has a text file, like the cab one I showed earlier, or you're able to get a right click and open with notepad on something, then if you can open a new notepad window, you can hopefully just save a bat file to the directory you do have access to, something like what I've shown here. And what this will do is it'll copy command prompt over and rename it. And so hopefully, even if you can't access command prompt itself, I've generally found that when you run bat scripts and things like that, it automatically just bypasses those restrictions, and then it gives you the access you need, hopefully in a directory again that you have access to. So that's a few ways to just try and get around these GUI restrictions if you do encounter something like that in a Citrix environment. Appliances as well are pretty common if they're based on Windows, for example, IoT edition. But network restrictions, especially now that we're all working remotely, you may have to virtual desktop or RDP into something. You may be going into an environment that doesn't have internet access if you're going through a VPN, doesn't have direct internet access back out if you're going through a VPN. And so this is pretty common in big enterprise environments, especially for hosts that are in some kind of segregated subnet, like a management or a security subnet. And it may even be on the other side of that Citrix box that we just escaped into. So we want to get some kind of connectivity to a host that's in this space, so we can move tools over for pen testing. Maybe you want to get some files back for some kind of analysis. There's some tricks and ways to do that. Obviously, the easy wins are going to be you do have some kind of direct access back to yourself. Maybe if you VPN'd in, you're now on that same local network. Windows has a ton of good clients for stuff like that. It has SSH now by default on newer versions of Windows 10, which is really cool. And it has things like SCP included, so that makes it really easy. Also, RDP has copy paste, which most people know about, but it also has a way to mount drives. So you can mount your local C drive, or maybe you've got a share or something across the RDP connection, and that's a really easy way to say share a folder full of tools with the target server that you're trying to test or trying to access. But that's the easy mode. That's when we've actually got something correct. If you do only have Citrix access, for example, like a Citrix RDP, Citrix usually has a copy paste for text, if not binary files. So certutil is a really cool tool on Windows. You give it a file and an out file, and it'll base64 it, and you can then just open up that base64 file and copy the base64 text, and then paste it back into a file on your host, and recombine it, or do the opposite if you want to move some kind of binary tool over. This is really good if, say, you want to dump LSAS or something on the target with the task manager window. You've got this LSAS dump. You want to run that through Mimikatz. You can just encode it, bring it out of the environment over Citrix, and then give it to your local copy of Mimikatz for parsing and get those hashes out. NetSH is another really cool one. It does require admin access, but lets you forward ports on Windows just from the command line. So you just need to give it a listening address and a listening port, and then you can give it a port to redirect that connection to. So that'll be really nice if, say, you have some kind of command line access maybe to an environment as an admin, but you want RDP access, and there's some kind of firewall or gateway blocking that connection. Well, you can use whatever ports you do have access to, and then redirect connections on those to RDP on the local host, and that way you sort of get a GUI back through whatever connection you have available to you. BYO code is a big one now on modern versions of Windows. So everything these days ships with .NET, and that means PowerShell, and that means C#. So PowerShell is a really, really powerful scripting language. And C# is a really great compiled language. Both of them are really well documented on the Microsoft website. So C# you can actually just write in Notepad and then and compile it with a CSC compiler on Windows. The little file name in red there, or folder name, is the version. So if you find you perhaps running on a slightly older version of Windows, you may have to use a version 3.5 or 3, but it should have the CSC compiler. And if you really have to do something in a pinch and you can't get internet access, you can't find a way to get your tools onto this box, you can always just write your own stuff, and that's a nice trick. There are some PowerShell one-liners I use pretty commonly. HomebrewedSec gave a really nice talk on this earlier, so I definitely recommend checking that out. Hopefully the recording will be up soon. But just the ability to test if a port is open is really helpful. We often rely on Nmap and things like that on a Linux host, but if you're on a Windows host and you don't have any way to access that, then testnet connection is very useful. It's only available on Windows 10 and 2016 PowerShell, as far as I'm aware. But it's very, very useful, and you can throw that in a loop if you wanted to. Just be aware it does take about 5 seconds to finish scanning a single port, regardless of whether it's open or not. So if you try to throw this in a huge loop and hit every TCP port, it's going to take a really long time. You're probably better off trying to build some little C# application or something that can do some multi-threading and do that a bit more efficiently. Invoke web request is great. Probably seen this one if you've done some CTFs or any kind of offensive security. A really good little one-liner just to connect over HTTP or HTTPS to a web server and pull down a file. You can also send post requests with it. Again, if you wanted to say certutil some kind of file or data, binary data, and then provide it as a post request, you could try and upload if you had a HTTP server that could accept that. And then we have the Windows admins grep, which isn't quite as nice, but generally does the trick. So That's just using get child item, which is kind of just a directory listing. You just give it a path and an extension, and recurse means it'll just recursively look through all the folders in that path. And then you're piping that to select string, which just reads all of the strings out of whatever it's been given, and looks for a pattern. So just summing up some of these tricks, like as InfoSec workers, we often faced with restrictive or compartmentalized environments. Sometimes it's our job to break out of them. Sometimes we need to break out of them in order to just do our job. And especially if you're working remotely, you're probably going to find you have a few more hoops you have to jump through before you can connect to the targets that you want. If you're asked to test a Windows kiosk or appliance, enjoy it. It's a lot of fun to be had at poking some kind of GUI application until it can give you a shell or some kind of operating system access. And generally, vendors don't do a fantastic job of locking that stuff down. Windows isn't really designed most of the time to be used in that kind of way. Aside from those universal Windows platform apps that I described, it's not really a security boundary to just have an Internet Explorer in full screen. And so there's usually some fun tricks you can find to get out of that. But yeah, Windows has a lot of built-in features. So if you need to do something simple, there's probably a tool already on the box. Or in a pinch, you can write one yourself using the languages available. And I highly recommend checking out the lolbass project. If you're interested in a sort of semi-complete list of what binaries ship with Windows and some very cool ways to use them. And that website documents what each kind of binary will do in terms of if you want to get code execution or you want to download some kind of file or you want to copy a file. That's super helpful, and also goes into things like app locker, which I'm not really going to cover, but is another kind of restriction that you might see in some kind of corporate environment. Okay, so moving on to curries. Honestly, this is a really big question, and not something I'm in a super good position to answer. Curry is a catch-all term that refers to a huge range of dishes from multiple continents and nations. As an Australian, I've eaten dishes labeled curry in Indian, Thai, Malaysian, Sri Lankan, Afghan, Ethiopian, Japanese, Mauritian, and a whole lot of other restaurants. The curries I cook at home, and which I'm going to show you, are probably most similar to sort of Indian cuisine, but I'm not really in a definition to define what curry is or isn't for another culture. But definitely when I'm talking about sort of what curry is, this is what's influencing me. And hopefully the principles that I talk about will sort of guide you well into making curries from some other kind of cuisine. That's what you're interested in. Okay, so what do I mean by curry, and why is it so damn delicious? So some kind of complex flavors from a spice mix, usually a little bit of heat from chilies or chili powder. It has a gravy or sauce which carries the above and soaks into meat, vegetables, rice, whatever you want to serve it with, which makes it extra delicious. The spice mix is really at the heart of it. If you fry spices in oil, especially with onion, you get magic. So that's what we're looking for, and that's what I really encourage you to play around with. And then the sauce is usually thickened with something coconut milk or maybe a tin of tomato or some yogurt or cream, and this will carry those delicious flavors really, really well. Okay, so making curry at home. There's 4 core ingredients. Again, this is just the way I see it, and as someone who cooks quite a lot. Onions, ideally yellow, but you can definitely use red. Probably use maybe less onions if you're using red because they're a little bit sweeter. Some kind of neutral oil. So by that I just mean something that isn't really strongly flavored. So olive oil, peanut oil, sesame oil, all those are going to have a pretty strong flavor. And we want something really, really neutral and mild so that our curry powder and spices can really carry the flavor. Salt makes everything delicious. So especially if you're used to eating out a lot and not cooking at home as much, perhaps you don't use sort of fresh or unprocessed ingredients very often, add more salt. I promise you're not going to go over your limit, and it makes everything delicious. So don't be afraid to add a couple of pinches. And then the curry powder is probably the bit where it gets the trickiest to provide recipes and to tell you exactly how to do things, because it's really going to depend on what you've got available. You can make them yourself, but I usually just buy a good one from the store. I've tried a bunch and I've got some that I like. I'd recommend trying to find something that looks good to you, and I definitely recommend starting with a mild one. You start with a mild curry powder, you're in a lot of control in terms of how hot you want to make things, and that I think is just a better experience. And then you can add more chili or add more yogurt or something if you need to cool it down. definitely better than trying to make some delicious meal and then you get to the end and it's too hot to eat. Okay, so what's in a sort of typical curry paste or powder? Some mix of spices, usually toasted and then ground into a powder. So commonly found in pre-made curry powder, these kind of things, coriander and cumin especially, are by far the most common in the powders that I use, and I bought usually the first two ingredients on the packet. But everything else on there is on that list is pretty common. And if you do want to do things like introducing new flavors or maybe experimenting with spices, I definitely recommend just getting a nice mild curry powder that you like, and then just add a little bit of extra of one of these and see what flavors come out and what kind of things you like. And chili powder is usually included by default. So as I said, watch out for that and try not to get something that's too hot to start with. You can always add more chili powder later if you decide you like it hotter. Okay, so creating a curry in 4 parts. So cook chopped onion in a generous amount of oil on a low medium heat until it's golden brown. This is really where the sort of the flavor and the sauce base comes from. Just cooking it really low and slow, not letting it burn, not letting it get too dark, just a nice golden brown. It usually takes somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes. You can let it go really far if you want to get it really brown and crispy. But that's a really good base to start with. Adding curry powder this, and as I said, once you add curry powder to hot oil and let it fry up for a couple of minutes, magic happens. This is when the really amazing smells start to come through. Your kitchen starts to fill with curious people from the rest of the household asking what's going on. This is the good stuff. Then you're adding some kind of liquid for the sauce. So tin tomato is a nice bit of acidity and not too overpowering. Coconut milk's really nice and creamy. Yogurt again is a bit of acidity, but also creamy. And if you're trying to make something like a butter chicken, then you're probably going to be using proper whole cream, which is pretty decadent, but it can be really delicious. And then vegetables you have available. You want to do this with a mind to what takes the longest to cook. So things like potato, sweet potato, pumpkin, eggplant take a really long time. Potato especially, you might be looking at sort of 50 minutes to an hour. You definitely want to add that earliest. And then things like meat, chicken, green beans, capsicums or peppers, okra. It really depends on exactly how big you've cut everything and what you're looking at, but probably looking at more like a 20 to 40 minute cook time there, depending on what it is. Some cuts of meat, if you're using like a piece of chuck steak that's got a lot of connective tissue or something, might even want a little bit longer just so you can get like a really nice slow cook and let all the fat render out of it. And then things like fish, spinach, peas, maybe kale, cook really quickly. So you'll want to be adding them sort of towards the end. If you're going into a curry and you haven't got a recipe, you're just sort of doing it ad hoc. As long as you have these things in the back of your mind and you're adding ingredients in roughly this order, you can't really go too wrong. Okay, so a super simple 6-ingredient fish curry. So 3 brown onions, about 500 grams or a bit over a pound of some kind of mild white fish. It can be frozen. I often just buy packs of whatever frozen fish fillets are available, and then just defrost them before use, obviously. And then a tin of coconut milk, some curry powder, oil, and salt. It's really that simple. So step 1 is to chop the onions and cry a lot. Yeah, there's no real way to avoid this. You can wear goggles if you want. It's not very cool, but yeah, you sort of get used to it after a while. So yeah, chop the onions carefully. With most of the stuff I'm presenting here, the size doesn't really matter, especially for the onions. You can chop them, you can dice them, you can slice them. They're going to be cooked for a pretty long time. So the main thing is that they're not too big, and then just put them in the oil and they're good to go. So yeah, add the onion and a pinch of salt, cook it for 25 to 30 minutes until it's nice and golden brown, and stir every 5 minutes or so. You don't have to be in the kitchen 24/7, but you just want to make sure that things aren't sticking and the pan isn't getting too hot. Don't be afraid to turn it down or even take it off the burner for a minute if you think that's happening. So step 4, I might have skipped a step there. After the spices are fried for about 3 to 4 minutes, add the fish and mix it thoroughly until it's coated in that lovely spiced, oops, okay. So that's the bit I've skipped. Step 3, add some curry powder, obviously. So this is where you'll probably want to add about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of curry powder and just stir it through. let it fry for 2 to 3 minutes, and then add the fish, and you've got this nice, lovely spiced oil that you're covering it with, and add about half a cup of water after it's had a couple of minutes to fry, and just scrape the bottom of the pan to make sure nothing's sticking. Once you add the curry powder to the oil and the onions, it generally tends to stick on the bottom a little bit, so give it a few minutes to fry up, but then don't be afraid to start adding some liquid. Make sure nothing's burning or getting too stuck. So after about 8 to 10 minutes, the fish should be breaking apart a little bit. This is when you'll want to start adding the coconut milk and just stir that through. We'll make it really nice and creamy, and it's fine if the fish isn't completely cooked through or broken apart, because we're going to cook it for a little while still with the coconut milk. And then cook for another 5 to 10 minutes or so. Once the fish is really broken down into nice little pieces, it's ready to serve. So I generally serve things with hot rice, freshly made, and some kind of salad if possible. But you could also make it with say naan bread or something like that, or a piece of toast even in a pinch if that's all you've got available. It's very flexible, and you don't have to be too traditional about it. But a simple salad. So these are what I serve with most of the curries. You just need some kind of nice fresh vegetables. So I usually use cucumber or carrot or tomato, and some kind of oil. This could be olive oil, salt and pepper, some kind of lemon or lime juice, or vinegar, some kind of acid. And then if you really like heat, you can add some fresh chili to this as well. So it's pretty simple, as it says on the tin. Just grate the carrot, grate or really thinly slice the cucumber like I've done here, or dice the tomato. Mix the oil, salt, pepper, and whatever the acid you're using is. Probably like half a lime or a lemon's fine for this, and a couple of tablespoons of vinegar if that's what you're using. And then just pour this mixture over the vegetable and mix it through. And just a really nice, refreshing sort of taste and texture go alongside something really rich and hot and spicy like a curry. Yeah, so there's you can do it with carrots as well. That's generally what it ends up looking like, and yeah, just a nice textural and flavorful contrast. Okay, so a simple potato curry. So again, 2 to 3 onions. The amounts here are really variable because this is kind of like the base I use for anything. I pretty much always add potato because I like potato. Who doesn't? And it goes really well in these kind of things. It does mean it takes a while to cook, but then you can really add whatever else you want. Again, just looking back at that chart on roughly how long things take to cook. So that'll also depend on how much you're adding. So if you're using a lot of potato or something, it's going to take a little while longer, and especially if you're cutting it into bigger pieces. But once we've got the potato, add some kind of meat or chicken or eggplant, whatever you've got around, whatever you like to eat. Again, some curry powder, and this time I'm going to be using some tomato, just a tin of crushed or diced tomato. And some more optional things you can add to curries, like garlic and ginger are always great if you're able to get it fresh, or if you've got a jar of it in the fridge is fine. And then some kind of extra veggies if you like something green, maybe green beans or peas or okra. I'm going to use okra and some yellow peppers or capsicum here. And then I'm also going to use some cumin seeds. Like I said right at the beginning, if you do find that you like some particular spices more than others, or perhaps you just like that flavor combination, for example, I really like cumin with potatoes and with eggplant. I'm going to add a little bit extra here, and in this case, I'm going to use whole seeds rather than a powder. And if you are worried about things being too hot, always just have some unsweetened yogurt on hand, and you can add that to dampen down the chili effect. Yeah, so this is what I'm using in the example. So just eggplants and peppers, oil. The one thing I would say here is you don't feel like you need the ginger and the garlic. It does add an extra little bit of flavor, but if you've really just got onions and maybe some chicken and some pepper in the house or something, that's plenty. The main thing is just you're just making this base with the onions and the spices, and then whatever you can add to that to make a delicious and hearty meal is going to work. So put about, again, 6 tablespoons of oil in a big pot, low heat, just like we did last time. Add the onion and salt. So yeah, very similar, 20 to 30 minutes. Maybe have a little bit less time for this one because we are going to be adding some potato and letting it cook a little bit longer. But again, you're just trying to make sure things don't stick too much. So while that's going, just prepare all your other ingredients. Like I said, I try to chop potato and things like that. Sweet potato maybe, or pumpkin, pretty small, because I know it's going to cook pretty slowly. Eggplant here, I've made it a little bit bigger, just because I know the potato is going to take a bit longer. So I know that it doesn't really matter if the eggplant takes a little longer, because it's still going to be waiting on that potato to cook. And then the peppers and the okra, I know take about the same time. So I'm just going to put them in a bowl together, because then it's easy to toss them all in at once. So the amount of curry powder you use really depends on how much other stuff you're adding and how strong you like your curry. So for this one, because the ingredients list was a little bit more flexible, it's really up to your discretion how much you want to add. I'd err on the side of caution if you perhaps don't like super strong flavors or worried about things being a little bit too hot. But for this amount, 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of curry powder is generally good. If you are adding extra things like cumin seeds, I'd probably add them first and fry them for a minute. So it's just cumin seeds in the oil and onion. And then add the garlic and ginger and fry it for another minute, just to get those flavors going and to let those spices fry up really nicely before you add everything else. And then again, fry the curry powder for a couple of minutes and scrape the pan as you need to. And here, add some water again. Don't be afraid to add water if things are looking a little bit sticky or drying up a little bit. And add a tin of tomatoes. The tomato sauce I find is really versatile. It's really easy to add that to whatever you have on hand, be it meat, chicken, fish. It goes really well with everything. So that's a good staple, and hopefully everyone's stocked up on some tin tomatoes recently. If you have some stock or stock powder, now is also a good time to add it. So you don't have to use water as a liquid. Yeah, if you've got some homemade chicken stock or something, that's fantastic, or even just a stock cube works really well, and this gives the sauce an extra sort of richness. And this curry sauce is going to be the base. So this is what it looks like. It should be smelling really good at this point. And from here, you can pretty much do anything. I'm going to keep going with this example where I'm using some eggplant and okra and stuff. But if you did just have some chicken breasts you diced, you could just throw those in there. They wouldn't take that long to cook at all. Probably 15 minutes with chicken and a few of the softer vegetables. Okay, so I'm going to be adding the potato and stirring it through so it's coated in the sauce, and then cooking that for about 15 minutes or so. Again, that's because I know that potato takes much longer than the other stuff, so I just wanted to give it a nice head start. Then I'm adding the eggplant, or if you were using, say, some kind of red meat, probably add it then. Again, it's going to depend a little bit on what the cut is, things like that. So use your discretion, and definitely don't be afraid to taste as you go. Obviously, you don't want to be tasting or trying big pieces of raw meat, but yeah, don't be afraid to have a little sip of the sauce and see if maybe it needs a bit more salt, a bit more water. Maybe it's a little bit hot. As I said again, you can always add yogurt to that, which will mellow things down and makes a really nice sauce. So yeah, after about 15 minutes, add the meat or the eggplant, and then in this case, I'm waiting another 30 minutes before I add the softer vegetables, just because I know that they're going to cook a lot quicker, and the eggplant and the potato are going to need the bulk of the time. Stir everything through as you add it, and add more water if the sauce is getting too dry. So here on the left, it's a nice looking sauce. It sort of covers most of the potatoes. They're going to cook really well in that. But once I added the eggplant, I realized it wasn't quite enough liquid. So that's where I'm going to be adding a little bit of water. I don't want to cover everything and make a soup, but you want it to be simmering pretty nicely and have everything just covered so that it can cook. And then, yeah, so get the whole pot to a gentle simmer and cook for sort of 30 to 40 minutes on a medium heat. The curry's ready whenever the vegetables and meat, if you're using it, are cooked through and tender. So keep testing with a fork and keep tasting. You can also do this in the oven. You sort of set it to about 180 or 350 Fahrenheit. You can put the pot in there with a lid. It's great if you've got a Dutch oven like I do. But otherwise, you can just use a pot on the stove or a big fry pan even, depending on how much you have. You just got to stir a little bit more if you're going to use the stove top, and make sure things aren't sticking and that you've got enough liquid in there. So this is what it looks like when it comes out. Reduced a little bit, everything's nice and soft, and all those flavors are nice and melded in. You get these nice pools of sort of spiced oil you can see on top as well, which is extra delicious and hopefully going to flavor our rice or breads or whatever we serve this with. And again, trying to serve it with a salad if possible and some fresh rice, or some plain yogurt. It's always a really nice accompaniment, especially if you have people perhaps over who are different levels of spice tolerance. Mixing some yogurt through is a really easy way to take that heat down a notch. Okay, so yeah, summing up, yeah, curries can be as simple or as complex as you want. So my examples hopefully are just a jumping off point. They're not a rule book. I'm not a professional chef or an expert, but I do really like cooking. There are some awesome recipes out there if you like to be a bit more adventurous. I would definitely recommend trying to make your own curry powder at some point. It does take a bit of time and patience. And there's some great recipes out there, and you'll need some kind of grinder. But don't be afraid to just start with a basic curry powder and then add a spice or two as you see fit, and just see what the flavors are that come out. And you'll pretty quickly find things that you like more of or less of, or perhaps what goes with what kind of meat or vegetables. Use whatever fresh ingredients you have. So that's one of the good things about this. With the environment we're currently in, you may not have access to everything, but curry goes pretty well with most vegetables and meat. So whatever you can get your hands on, if it's frozen things like frozen onions or peas, green beans, whatever it may be, you should still be able to make a really delicious meal. Just if you do use things like frozen onions, they might need to cook a little longer because there's going to be a lot of moisture in there, and you'll want to get that out so they get nice and golden and brown. And yeah, you have access to whole spices. They're another great one. And don't forget the salads as well. I think it always makes a really nice touch. I always, or usually get some pretty good compliments if I'm serving some kind of salad. Just takes the meal to another level and provides a nice bit of refreshment from the intensity of the rest of the dish. Yeah, so thank you all for listening, and stay safe out or in there. Yeah, be good to each other, and yeah, hope to see everyone online and more of these kind of things and as part of the community. If there's any questions, Moonin, I'd be happy to have a couple of chats. Looks like I've got about 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, I was just looking at the question list, and it looks like no one actually has any questions here. They're mostly just talking in the Slack about how they all want to make curry right now.
I would highly
if not
recommend
sooner.
that. Yeah, it is pretty early in the morning in Australia right now, but honestly, I'm thinking about it.
Here we go. Here's a couple. Do you recommend a side salad? Well, yes, he just said that he recommends a side salad with curry. That's a separate question. Someone else is asking for rice recipes, but honestly, that's just rice, water, and a little salt mostly.
Yeah, honestly, there's a few little things you can do to spice it up. So often maligned
I
bay
like
leaf.
garlic.
Yeah, garlic's good. If you throw a couple of bay leaves in the water that you're boiling the rice in, that goes really well. You just get a nice fragrance coming out of it. Especially if you're using basmati rice, I actually like, or I prefer to boil it in a pan or a pot, sorry, rather than using a rice cooker. Throw some bay leaves in there, maybe some cardamom pods.
Yeah, so just mentioning cardamom.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Some really great biryani and pilau recipes out there. It's a lot more complex, but there's some fantastic sort of spiced rice dishes where the rice really is at the heart of it, and you sort of cook the rice with spices or as part of the curry, or you layer the curry on top of the rice and then bake it. So there's definitely some cool stuff you can do out there if you want to take it to the next level. That's one of the great things about curry is.
Go ahead.
Oh, nope, I'm done.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and someone else is asking when to add chickpeas.
Actually, that's another good recipe. If you Google New York Times chickpea and pumpkin recipe, chickpea and pumpkin curry, sorry, they've got a fantastic recipe. The chickpeas generally don't take that long to cook. I think they have them in for maybe 15, 20 minutes, but that's a fantastic recipe. I've actually used it a bunch of times before. So yeah, New York Times chickpea and pumpkin is a great one, and yeah, they generally don't take too long. If I was adding it to something like this, I'd probably add it around the same time as the okra and the peppers.
Yeah, especially if they're canned or already cooked, they really don't take long.
Exactly. Yeah, they're gonna be really soft. They do go really well with coconut milk as well. Maybe not with the fish one, but if you wanted to do, say, instead of fish, you want to do chicken with the coconut milk one, and add it to the chickpeas or something, that'd be delicious. And they'd probably take about the same time to cook. Maybe you could add the chickpeas a little later. But yeah, that's another fantastic ingredient. And again, something you can usually get canned that lasts a long time.
Indeed. Yeah, just make sure for the canned ones that you drain them thoroughly, because the effect otherwise is unpleasant in the extreme.
Yeah,
Someone
definitely.
else is
Sorry, go on.
someone else is recommending red lentils, chickpeas, and spinach.
Yeah, yeah, spinach is a great one, and again, really easy to just stir through at the last minute, cooks really quickly. Lentils are
Ish.
fantastic. I wish I could have done a whole other presentation on dal. Dal is really simple. It starts very similar, so frying onions and some spices, and then cooking some lentils separately, and then usually just drain the lentils once they're well and cooked, or if the moisture's cooked out of them, then just stir that spice mixture through the lentils, and it's just like a really nice hearty lentil stew essentially that you end up with. So definitely check out some dal recipes if that's something you're interested in. Really can't recommend that enough. And again, lentils are something that keep really well. Maybe a less commonly taken off the shelves as the first impulse buy. So hopefully you can still get them.
Yeah, they are very pleasant. Yeah. All right. So looks like that's the end of the questions we do have. Thank you very much for spending the time to talk with us about living off the land and living off of our fridges.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, personally love curry. Love it so much. Literally started drooling during your introduction. So anyway,
Oh, thank you so much, Moonin, and everyone else,
great
Leslie,
to
and all the volunteers who helped with this.
absolutely, and we're glad to have you here. So this looks to be the end of track 2, folks. This is the end of our broadcast day on PancakesCon track 2. It appears that we do have a LobbyCon Zoom listed somewhere in the chat here. I've misplaced which, I think Ray Redacted is the one paying attention to that, so go pester him. At any rate, we're very, very grateful to have you all here, and hopefully we'll be able to see you again sometime soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay with PancakesCon. We'll be very glad to see you at any subsequent events if that should in fact happen. Otherwise, we'll see you on the Twitters. Yes, virtuallobbycon.com seems to be the URI in question. At any rate, thank you all for participating. We're glad to have you. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And we'll see you all in the future. This is Munin signing off.